What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for The Flash Season 5, Episode 21, titled The Girl with the Red Lightning. This episode began showing Thawne's execution, where the timer, went down to 0, and now it means Thawne is about to get executed. That's where the episode begins, and also that is where it ends. That is something I really liked about the episode, the unraveling of Thawne's master plan at the end, how he manages to escape, or how he's going to escape in the next episode. That's probably my favorite thing about this episode, Ralph unraveling that whole plan. Although I don't really understand how he figured it out, it still was fun, and it still was mysterious, and it still was very interesting to watch him figure that out, and how they managed to show that in this episode. And in the end, Thawne seemingly managed to escape, or I guess he will in the beginning of the next episode. So that's easily my favorite part of this episode. So first of all, I want to talk about the things that I didn't really love about this episode. There was the Sherlock side story with his girlfriend from Earth 1, who it's the same doppelganger as all of his ex-wives. I do think that they spent way too much time on that in this episode, where they should have focused it on the main storyline. It felt like, and also this came out of nowhere, as we haven't seen her in a very long time. This is a relationship that they've been building at all this season, so I don't think this was necessary for this episode at all, and it kind of took away from it just a little bit. These scenes were not cute. These scenes were not meant to be anything. They didn't further anything, any character, any story, any development for anything. So because of that, I don't like it that much. It's in the second to last episode of the season, and it just feels so out of place. There's also the short scenes with Joe trying to figure out how to run the CCPD while David Singh is gone. Didn't love this either. I don't think this was necessary for the second to last episode of the season to show Joe try to come to his own as a leader. I think that they could have done that earlier in the season, right when he came back, or if he'd never left during those episodes, which I guess he left, so maybe they wanted to do this, but they had to push it off until now. That didn't end well for this episode, because I don't think these scenes were very good. And finally, the last thing that I didn't like about the episode, and probably my least favorite part about the episode, is all the scenes of Barry and Iris parenting Nora, all the scenes where they're talking to her and telling her how she shouldn't do these things, or she should do these things. They're so cheesy and so corny and kind of cringy as well. It's also so weird because Nora is the same age as them, if not older. The actress for Nora Allen is a couple years older than both Grant Gustin and Candace Penn, and they might change the age because she does look younger, but at the same time, they're at least the same exact age. And it's so weird that they have this parent-child dynamic. First of all, again, Barry and Iris did not raise her, and second of all, they are the same age, and I don't think that's really been much of a problem this entire season, although I do think it was always unusual. This episode took it to an extreme, and it felt so weird the entire time that Barry and Iris were trying to parent Nora and telling her what to do, what not to do. It felt so weird, and it doesn't help that these scenes were so cringy and so cringily writed. I think the writing here was so bad for these scenes. So that's generally what I disliked about the episode. The Sherlock side story I didn't love. Joe's short little story I didn't think was necessary either, and the scenes with Barry and Iris parenting Nora, they really took away from the episode, and they were really weird, and I think they dragged the episode and the storyline of the episode of Nora having to connect to Grace. They dragged it on for way too long, and because of that, I think this episode is not necessarily as good as it could be. Okay, so now I got out of the way what I disliked. Let's talk about everything that I did like about this episode. First of all, I want to say that there were two pretty awesome Flash scenes, like slow motion scenes where you see his powers. First of all, there was the scene with the explosion, and they made him seem like he just got out of there in time, even though he had, I think half a second to get out of there, and he could extend that half a second for a couple minutes, so I don't think he had any problem there getting out of there, but even still, I did like that scene. I think it looked very cool. There's also another scene where when Nora is trying to connect to Grace through the mental thing, I forgot what it's called, the cerebral inhibitor, I'm pretty sure, but there's lightning everywhere, and Barry had to maneuver around there using his speed. I think those were pretty cool. I liked seeing those, him using his power scenes. They look really cool. They make him look pretty cool as well. Other things I liked about this episode is the connection between Nora and Grace. I think really worked for the episode, worked for Nora as a character as well as Grace as a villain. The way that although again they dragged down this storyline too much, where Barry and Iris told Nora not to do certain things, I do like the build-up of the episode towards the Nora connecting to Grace and finding where she is, although it turns out not really necessary, because I'm betting she went to the CCPD and Joe probably would have pressed a button to tell Team Flash where she is, so not really necessary, this whole storyline in the end. But at the same time, I did like the build-up of the finding of Grace at the end. There is a fight between Grace or Cicada V2 and Team Flash, which I did not love. I think didn't look great. A lot of it looked pretty cheap and stiff. A lot of things in this episode did look cheap and stiff, just like the last episode. Although this episode did have some certain scenes that looked pretty good, I think the fight scene here between Cicada and Team Flash was not great, in my opinion. Flash is just thrown around, and then it's just an elongated man and Killer Frost fighting Cicada, and they're getting their asses kicked, which is fine. I mean, I do think that makes sense, but I don't really think this fight scene looked very good at all. Like, it didn't look as good as the fight scene we saw when we saw Cicada V2 for the first time. That looked really cool with the colors and the CGI and everything. This one, it looked very boring. It looked like the characters were just being thrown around, and it didn't look good in that either. But then there was also the supposed to be intense scene with Cisco trying to disarm the device that is going to kill all the metahumans in Central City. This was definitely an intense scene. I did feel the tension there. I thought it was possible that Cisco would die in this scene when Cicada was walking up to him. I thought it was possible, so because of that, it was definitely pretty intense in that moment. But I don't think that is enough for the climax of the episode, because the climax of the episode, in my opinion, was pretty disappointing. Although, again, the unraveling of Ralph figuring out Thawne's plan, that worked very well for the end of the episode too. And although it felt like the end of the episode came out of nowhere, and it felt like the episode ended in a very weird note where Barry is about to shoot the device and Ralph is telling him not to, that is obviously going to lead directly into the season finale. It's a very weird ending to the episode, but at the same time, it is a pretty great cliffhanger, and I'm definitely still, even though this episode was pretty disappointing and it wasn't amazing, I am still pretty excited for the season finale, because we are going to see Thawne again, and I do think that the unraveling of that storyline was handled very well in this season, so I'm excited to see the conclusion to all of that. That being said, the penultimate episode to this season was not a great one. I think that it was better than the last episode, but not on par with once the season started getting really good in episode 15. It's not really on par with the quality of that. So I will give it an 8.3 out of 10. So I know this video is a little shorter than usual, and there's no real reason for that. There wasn't really enough to talk about in this episode that warranted going into depth over it. I felt like this episode was pretty convoluted. I felt like that it was a little messy at times, and because of that, this episode was not that easy to talk about in depth, which is why this episode is shorter than usual episode reviews. But I do expect next week's episode review, the season finale, to be probably a lot longer than the usual episode review, so this is going to compensate for that. But let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.